We're coming back to you, dear old Nauvoo, to camp once more on bending shore with skies are blue. With waters rippling, we'll all go dipping, or float along with broken song at old Nauvoo.
Thank you for joining us tonight in this gathering of remembrance of Old Nauvoo. What you just witnessed is Martha Harper sharing her memories of Old Nauvoo. It was Martha singing a song that related to camp in Old Nauvoo, a camp that she would travel to from Western Iowa to Nauvoo. That was a song that many of the youth campers shared as they were staying in the Nauvoo Mansion House or in tents scattered across the lawn. We're also going to open this evening with two video clips. You're going to recognize the voice of Alma Blair. Alma is well known throughout the community of Christ as a professor as well as a summer instructor. Alma was a legend really throughout the community of Christ and Restoration History community. He educated and impacted the lives of generations of Graceland University students while serving as a history professor on the Lamoni campus for nearly 4 decades. Rather than taking time off between semesters, Alma traveled to Nauvoo each summer for over 30 years to train young adults and young adult summer interns at the Joseph Smith Historic Site. His passion for historic detail, whether it was reconstructing the red brick store or restoring the mansion house or holding late night discussions with students after class, it worked to inspire future historians and curators and lifelong church history enthusiasts. Alma's lessons in interpreting material culture and the historic context of the 19th century gave students a greater understanding and increased appreciation for both the past and present community of Christ. In 2016, the summer internship program, both in Kirtland and at the Joseph Smith Historic Site, was renamed to the Alma Blair Internship Program in honor of Alma and his enduring legacy. And speaking of enduring legacy, after we finish listening to Alma's videos, we will then share together in a historic hymn called There's an Old, Old Path. That hymn was written by Vida E. Smith, granddaughter to Emma Smith and Joseph Smith Jr. Vida Smith was born in Nauvoo in her grandmother's home, which was traditionally known as the Mansion House. So the music is offered by the Beyond the Walls Choir this evening.
It is difficult now to imagine the hundreds of homes and buildings in Nauvoo at her height. Most were wooden block, log, or frame constructions which have long since disappeared. Some foundation stones may still be seen. Many others lie buried or have been removed for use elsewhere. Most houses were small and unpretentious. The home of William Marks, Nauvoo Stake President in Joseph's lifetime, and later a member of the reorganized church's first presidency, is not atypical. Some 200 to 300 brick buildings were built between 1843 and 1845. The prophet envisioned a community combining industry, commerce, and agriculture. Farms rapidly spread out from Nauvoo, and small settlements appeared some distance from Joseph's city. In Nauvoo proper, the original plan was to divide each of the large residential city blocks into 4 one-acre plots. Each home was to have enough space for fruit trees, a garden, and grazing for a few animals. Brigham Young's home illustrates the plan. A root cellar, cistern, well, and necessary house were usual. This generous use of land could not always be followed, since the expanding population, high land prices, and commercial needs forced consolidation on some lots. Also, as in Brigham's case, costs might dictate building one section of a home first, with wings added later. The Smiths added a kitchen to the log section of this house known as the homestead. They lived here from 1839 to 1842. Situated on the flat near the river, it was the center of activity in Nauvoo during those years. The homestead was too small to accommodate Joseph's family and his many visitors, so the large frame mansion house was built. The mansion house had another wing, now destroyed, added to it in 1843, which served as a hotel and place for Nauvoo's social gatherings. North of the mansion house, Sidney Rigdon's home doubled as the post office. Besides being postmaster, Rigdon was also a counselor to the prophet. Further north, one wing of a hotel still stands, the last of the commercial buildings that lined the street. South of Smith's home, construction was begun on a large four-story hotel in anticipation of a continuing influx of visitors. The Nauvoo House, as it was named, was to be a large L-shaped structure, 120 feet by 120 feet. It would have housed several hundred guests had it been completed. The building of the Nauvoo House had been commanded in a revelation, an indication of the practicality of Smith's religion. To the west of the mansion house, along Water Street, over 20 businesses were located. All are now gone, including Joseph Smith's general store. Its upper floor served various purposes. It provided office space for Joseph's real estate and church affairs, and was a place for meetings of civic and church groups. Also, early endowment ceremonies were performed in it. Joseph's red brick store has now been reconstructed on this, its original site. Unfortunately, many saints expected their storekeeper prophet to be generous, and he had too many credit and not enough cash customers. Joseph's economic troubles were symptomatic of a major problem in Nauvoo: inadequate finances and little industry. Fortunately, the saints' early needs were modest. They could easily handcraft leather and wooden articles and some iron products. But pewter, brass, and copper items often needed to be imported. The saints had few industries producing exports. Spinning and weaving one's own cloth was less expensive, but time-consuming, and even some ordinary products had to be purchased elsewhere. Importing utensils, cloth, and other goods drained money from Nauvoo's economy. Although some immigrants brought cash with them, it was an uncertain source of finances. The fruit industry is now waning, but the city is beginning its third life, that of a major Midwest tourist attraction. Visitors, some returning to the city of their forefathers, others merely curious, come in increasing numbers to see the reconstruction of Old Nauvoo. Joseph Smith Historic Properties, sponsored by the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is one of two groups restoring Nauvoo. The other, Nauvoo Restoration Incorporated, is supported by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Although extensive historical and archaeological research has been done in planning the reconstructions, the problem of adequately and accurately interpreting the Nauvoo experience remains unsolved. No restoration, however meticulous, can expect to recreate the devotion and energy, or bitterness and sorrow, of those who envisioned on this land a holy city. We have changed since the saints raised their tents and cabins here in the spring of 1839. We cannot go back. Yet it is well we try to imagine their hope and their pain. For what happened here is a part of all human endeavor. We dream our dreams, we have our fears, we live, and something of us endures.
In the book of Joshua, we read a story about the Israelites crossing the Jordan River to enter the land of Canaan. The story says that God worked a wonder, halting the flow of the river so the people could cross on dry ground. Joshua then has the people create a monument of 12 stones taken from the riverbed. In the future, he tells the people, use these stones to teach your children what God did for you. The Joseph Smith Historic Site was a monument made of wood and brick and stone. Community of Christ used this monument, as did members of other branches of the Latter-day Saint faith tradition, to preserve and transmit the memory of what our spiritual forebears accomplished in Nauvoo. In other words, we used this place to preserve and transmit the memory of what God did for and through our spiritual forebears as they worked to build sacred community in Nauvoo. On the other hand, Nauvoo was a place of conflict and schism. Community of Christ came into being as a result of divisions among the saints that originated in Nauvoo. In the early years of our stewardship of the Smith family properties in Nauvoo, we used the site to perpetuate contention and rivalry with other Latter-day Saints. In more recent decades, though, we used the site as a place for cooperating with our religious rivals, for making peace, for extending the hand of reconciliation. My name is John Charles Duffy. I worked for several years at the Joseph Smith Historic Site during the summers, teaching a course in Latter-day Saint history for the summer interns there. We're going to hear brief remarks from 5 individuals, some of whom I got to know during those years, all of whom served in some capacity at the Joseph Smith Historic Site. These individuals will share with us what it meant to them to be in this place. As you listen to their remarks, think about what this historic site has meant to you. What sacred stories from the past does this place memorialize for you? Did you have experiences at the Joseph Smith Historic Site in which you connected positively with people across religious divisions? At any time during this online gathering, you're invited to use Zoom's chat function to post your own memories or stories for others to read. We'll hear first from Paul DeBart. Paul was a summer intern at the Joseph Smith Historic Site in 1966 and 67. He was an on-site archaeologist during the 1970s and 80s, and he directed another series of digs in the 2010s, working on the Times and Seasons site, the Mansion House, and sites associated with Joseph Smith Sr., Samuel Smith, and Hiram Smith, among others. Paul?
Thank you, John Charles. The monumental, marvelous people that have settled and been the stewards of the Bend in Nauvoo have become my friends. 10,000 years of archaeological evidence came to light in our quarter century of investigations. Mammoth hunters occupied the site at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. For them to face the huge critters with tusks 15 feet long and invite them home for dinner took tremendous courage. Those folks were followed by 8,000 years of bison hunters who harvested the beasts as herds crossed the shallows of the Des Moines Rapids. Again, to face a bison herd led by bulls with horns as wide as a man's reach, the bulls protecting the cows and both protecting the calves, took courage and skill not to get trampled, let alone to successfully invite one home to dinner. Black sand incised pottery, the earliest in the Midwest, a marvelous invention transforming mud into vessels that could carry water and seeds, appears on our site about 2,500 years ago with the early woodland people. And then 2,000 years ago, middle woodland people, traders brought goods from the whole Mississippi drainage to our site. They buried family members on the same terrace chosen by the Smith family for their cemetery. Calanite from Minnesota, Dongola chert from Tennessee, and assorted other trade items were found, marking the sacred nature of the site for thousands of years. They buried their dead, like the Mormons, on the terrace above the rapids, not in a swamp. In 1971, under the direction of Robert T. Bray at the University of Missouri, I had the privilege of uncovering the remains of the Bee House under which Joseph and Hiram had been buried until 1928. To find the coffin nails marking the rounded shoulder of the coffin placed a special stewardship of the site and the people of the site in my soul. To now have the privilege of representing Joseph Smith III at his home in Lamoni extends that stewardship. The taste of Zion that I savored in digging at Nauvoo with the Latter-day Saints, the Restorationists, the Community of Christ, local and regional people, all with a common interest in history and archaeology, can be seen in 250,000 of artifacts, and more importantly, in good relationships among the staff and volunteers. When COVID stopped the dig, we initiated the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum, now in its 4th year, with a continuation of that taste of Zion. To have presentations from across the Smith-Rigdon spectrum and beyond, on the land of Nephi and Peru, Guatemala, Malay, Chesapeake, Georgia, and in Joseph Smith's head, with presenters confident in the evidence they have and participants training. How do we get that on there? With participants examining and treating each other with respect and amicability. It's like the archaeological team examining artifacts, for each has its own story, truth for us to learn and appreciate. I appreciate the thousands of years of tracks of previous stewards uncovered, and hope the new stewards will continue the amicable relationships developed over our 1/4 century of working together.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we'll hear from Allie Weston. Allie was a summer intern at the Joseph Smith Historic Site in 2016. Allie comes from a family of Joseph Smith Historic Site interns. Her older sister, Katie, and Katie's husband, Kevin, were year-round guides there from 2008 to 2010. Allie and Katie's mother, Gretchen, was a guide in the early 80s, and Kevin's grandfather, Blair, was a guide in the 50s. Allie?
I always knew that I wanted to follow in my mother and sister's footsteps and work as a guide in Nauvoo. I grew up visiting the Joseph Smith Historic Sites for occasional weekends and summer breaks, and even a very memorable middle school youth group trip where we stayed in the Nauvoo house and played the most terrifying game of hide and go seek there. At the end of my freshman year at Graceland, I was finally able to spend a summer there myself. And what I found in Nauvoo is a history of a people full of strength who endured hardship, violence, strife, and drama because they felt compelled to follow Christ's mission no matter the sacrifice. One of my favorite parts of guiding tours was the first stop outside of the visitor center following the end of the introduction video. As a group of strangers blinked the darkness from the theater out of their eyes and stood in the daylight, I would ask them to look around at the mowed lawns and quaint historic buildings scattered across the grass and the endless geese. And I would ask them to imagine what it was like when the Saints first saw it. The flats of the town of Commerce, a mostly undeveloped wetland with only a few buildings. And I would feel such a yearning as I imagined it. A yearning to have a faith as strong and unyielding as the early saints who saw the difficult path ahead and chose it anyway. In spite of all the obstacles they faced, the financial issues which followed them from Kirtland, the discrimination and violence in Missouri, the skepticism and fear of the locals, the early saints saw that wild land and dared to dream of the city beautiful up on the bluff. And they did it. By the time of Joseph Smith Jr.'s passing, those same untamed flats were indeed beautiful, full of young families and buildings and an elegant temple overlooking it all. A legacy from olden times of a faith so powerful that the improbable becomes the inevitable. This is what Nauvoo means to me, and I still feel a yearning for my inner Nauvoo, that unshakable testimony of strength and faith, and I'm forever grateful for my summer there on the banks of the Mississippi.
Thanks, Allie. Community of Christ's history in the Pacific dates back to the 1840s, when missionaries who had been set apart in the upper room of the red brick store traveled to Nauvoo, to what is now French Polynesia. Our next speaker made that journey in reverse, as it were, Emile Houry is speaking with us from his home nation of French Polynesia. Emile was a summer intern at the Joseph Smith Historic Site in 2017. Emile?
Hi, Arana from Tahiti. The first time when I went to Nauvoo, it was in 2015 or just before 2014 when Locke introduced me to Nauvoo. And Nauvoo for me was a great experience, have forged me, and I learned a lot about the church history and the faith of the people that was there at that time. And I remember when I guide the people to the homes, I like to feel what they feel at the time. And when I finish my tour, I always sing the Spirit of God in Tahitian goes like this. My dear Urara te varu te te mai tira no te tau hope a special memories from Nauvoo that I share also here, even when I went, when I go to island as the 70 of the church, I also share my experience of Nauvoo with them, even Kirtland Temple. My the character or the people or the person that I remember all the time when I was in Nauvoo was Emma. I think Emma was my heroine. She was the one who endured everything and the one who brings back to order. I think God called her to be really the person to be there when needed. And I will finish my speaking by thank everyone. I'm so grateful for all the people that I met there and also for God's calling for the church to move forward. Even when I heard the process of everything happen, I cried for 1 week. But now I'm okay. I mean, I'm doing great now because God knows what we need. And I put my faith on Him and in Jesus Christ. Thank you.
Merci, Emile. Thank you. Before we continue with our next couple of speakers, I want to play a very short video that Emile recorded while he was in Nauvoo. One of the things that made the Joseph Smith Historic Site such an uplifting place to be was the natural environment. In Emile's video, which was shot outside the Red Brick Store, outside the Nauvoo House in summer of 2017, we can see the rich vegetation growing along the Mississippi River. We can hear the singing and the chattering of birds. One of Community of Christ's enduring principles is the sacredness of creation. So let's take a minute to experience sights and sounds of God's sacred creation as manifest at the Joseph Smith Historic Site. Over the years, members of other branches of the Latter-day Saint faith tradition, besides Community of Christ, have taken part in the work of the Joseph Smith Historic Site. Our next speaker, Alan Clark, is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who served as a summer intern at the Joseph Smith Historic Site. Alan and his wife Megan, along with their children, lived on site during summer of 2018. Their daughter Mirabal took part in a reader's theater that we staged that year at the annual June 27th memorial in the Smith Family Cemetery. Alan?
Thanks, John Charles. What can I say briefly about a place that is sacred to so many people? Like John Charles mentioned, my wife Megan and I had the opportunity to stay in Nauvoo while I interned at the Joseph Smith Historic Site in 2018. And the program allowed us the amazing opportunity to bring our small children with us for the summer. So we met and worked with wonderful people like Wendy Eaton, Rick McGregor, Dennis and Mary Lou Pieper Gertis, and many others. As a graduate student then, I got to pick the brains of Lachlan Mackay and Ron Romig with questions about history. And in the evenings, we were able to walk the streets of Old Nauvoo and just feel the power of the place soak into our bones. There were many evenings sitting on the very bench that was in the video before, where we looked out across the river and the city. I've spent most of my life in the American Southwest. My experience with Mormonism writ large in its many varieties truly began as an intern in Nauvoo. I've been a member of the Utah Church all my life, and all I knew about the varieties of Mormonism beyond my own, I had gleaned from history books. So living and working in Nauvoo at the Joseph Smith Historic Site provided me the opportunity to meet my extended family, or cousins, as Lachlan puts it often. The community of Christ welcomed my family to Nauvoo as if we were one of their own. Rick invited us to church on Sunday and then asked if I'd also be willing to speak when we came. This immediate acceptance and welcome is one of the most important things I gained from my time there. I learned we are a single family of believers, bound by our faith in the restoration of the gospel and our history rooted in Nauvoo. We may disagree on things, and in some ways, even behave more like a dysfunctional family at times, but we are a family. I've never been welcomed more kindly than I was welcomed in Nauvoo, and I will cherish my time and memories at the Joseph Smith Historic Site. So thank you for leading with your Christ-like example and modeling how sacred spaces can be shared with all who wish to enter them.
Thanks, Alan. Our final speaker in this series is Catherine Pollock, who was a summer intern at the Joseph Smith Historic Site in 2017 and 2018. In the years since then, she's remained very active in the Latter-day Saint historical community. There's more I could say about her, but I genuinely don't know what she's planning to say about herself in her remarks, so I will just turn the time over to her. Catherine?
Hi, everybody. I'm Catherine Pollock. My time at the Joseph Historic Site was special to me. It was a time of personal growth, reflection, as well as a time that, retrospectively, I could see planted a seed in my further historical pursuits of the Latter-day Saint tradition and helped me build relationships in the church and beyond. I came to the historic site as a spiritual seeker. I felt confused about my spiritual identity, but people told me, like John Charles, that was just fine. And I found answers there in Nauvoo as I interacted with people, and I found a peaceful place to rest my soul. A lot of Nauvoo is just a lot of fun. And then I met people from all over the world. So Emil from Tahiti and Minji from Korea. And we not only explored Nauvoo itself, but John Charles took us on the tour of the larger city. So I remember we were in the Nauvoo Catholic Church, and another intern took some of the holy water and splashed himself. Then they were like, "Oh, that's holy water," and he was like, "Oh." So we had, fun interreligious experiences like that. In 2018, I helped summer instructor John Charles Duffy with some of the research he was doing by scanning reports about the International Community of Christ and Ethnic Ministries out of the Saints Herald. And later I would pursue some of the things I found in more archive research. And now I'm actually writing those things after a while. But what I'll remember most about about my time there are the community people who helped me travel on my journey, told me about their lives, gave me encouragement, laughed with me. I'm grateful for what the Joseph Smith Historic Site taught me and how it helped me grow as a person. The time of my life that I won't be forgotten.
Thanks, Catherine. The 5 individuals we've just heard from are, of course, just a few of the many people who helped run the Joseph Smith Historic Site over the decades in various capacities. Summer interns, year-round staff, grounds and maintenance, the archaeological digs, construction and restoration. We're going to take a few minutes now to watch a slideshow of photos taken during the 100+ years the Community of Christ administered this site. As the slideshow is running, you are invited to use Zoom's chat function, if you haven't already done so, to post your own fond memories or feelings about the Joseph Smith Historic Site. Many thanks to Liz Swick and Mike Nielsen for creating this slideshow for us. Liz and Mike are currently summer interns at the Community of Christ Library and Archives in Independence, where they're working with archivist Rachel Kilgrew. The organ accompaniment that you'll hear during their slideshow was performed by Pam Robinson. For nearly all of us, news of the sale of the Joseph Smith Historic Site came suddenly out of the blue. When I heard the news, one of my first reactions was regret that I had not known back in the summer of 2023 that that would be my last summer at the site. Had I known, I would have done something to say goodbye to the place before I left. Our next speaker did have the chance to say goodbye. When news of the sale broke, Wendy Eaton was in her 8th year as a year-round staff member at the Joseph Smith Historic Site. In addition, her parents had begun working at the site a year earlier doing grounds and maintenance. Very shortly before the historic Smith family homes were handed over to their new owners, Wendy had the opportunity to sit inside them and say goodbye. I've asked her to share with us that experience.
The evening before the announcement of the sale occurred, I took time to walk through the sites just to see them one last time. As I entered the mansion house, I immediately started thinking of all the different women. I thought of Lizzie Smith waiting for her husband Alexander to return home from an extensive mission west. I thought of Emma Smith Bideman and her loving kindness to her neighbors, the newly arrived immigrants, the expectant mothers, the children eager for her love and her cookies. Before I set the alarm, I stood in Emma's kitchen and I thought of the generations of appointees, volunteers, and interns who learned the very unique ministry that came from telling our history within the spaces where it happened. I thought of myself and how fortunate I was to sit in Emma's kitchen nearly a year ago, joined by my virtual congregation, while 2 dear friends in Utah ordained me an elder. And I wonder what Emma would have thought of that happening in her kitchen. A gentle spring storm was starting to move across the Mississippi River as I crossed the street to the homestead. These rooms I saw through tears, and my only thought was Emmeline. Just a few years ago, all I knew was she was Joseph Smith III's first wife, and she's buried in the family cemetery. But in reading everything I could on Emmeline, I learned so much more of an incredible woman. And an incredible woman to me personally, because Emmeline got me through COVID when I was by myself so much. Sharing her story helped me get comfortable with giving lectures and recording podcasts. And when we reopened after COVID, if I gave a tour, guests heard about Emmeline. And I just couldn't stop the tears because I wonder if she will ever be mentioned within the walls of her home again. The rain started and I opened the door facing the river and I sat on the step and watched the storm blow quickly through. And I thought of Emmeline doing the same thing in that very home. Then I did one last check, set the alarm, and left. The night before I moved away from Nauvoo, I went down to the cemetery and I sat at Emmeline's grave for a time to say thank you and to say that if I ever return to Nauvoo, I'll be sure to stop by. It's a strange grief we're all experiencing. The people have been gone for decades, the buildings are still there, but we still grieve the loss. Remember, though, that we are Emma's church, and in all the grief that she experienced, she continued to act with kindness. If I could think of anything to close with, it's Emma. And hoping that you all are able to take Emma's love with you through your life. Thank you.
We're holding this gathering on June 27th, the anniversary of the deaths of Joseph Jr. and his brother Hiram. It became traditional for the Joseph Smith Historic Site to hold a memorial service each year on June 27th there in the Smith Family Cemetery. I organized those memorials from 2015 to 2023. During those years, our memorial services had participation from multiple Latter-day Saint fellowships, Community of Christ, the LDS Church, the Restoration branches. Even one year, unexpectedly, some FLDS women who happened to be visiting the site that day. As part of the service, roses would be laid on the graves of Hiram, Joseph, Emma, and other family members and friends buried in that cemetery. Later in the day, some of us would drive up to Nauvoo's Catholic cemetery on the outskirts of town to lay a rose on the grave of Julia, Joseph and Emma's adopted daughter. I have here in my hand a bouquet of roses, which I now symbolically lay as if at those graves. I do this in remembrance of the individuals buried there in the Smith Family Cemetery, and in remembrance of all the Latter-day Saints of the Nauvoo years, wherever they were in the world. Those saints are members of our spiritual family, our sisters and brothers. They are people who struggled and suffered, who knew heartbreak and hope, accomplishment and disillusion, joy and division, as they tried in all their human weakness and woundedness to build sacred community. May we continue building on the foundation of faithful service they laid for us. Barb, take us home.
Thank you, John Charles. As we draw our gathering to a close, I can't help but highlight the thread of gratitude shared and felt this evening by so many. Gratitude for those who have gone before us, paving a path of faith and resilience that has changed an untold number of lives, including my own. Gratitude for the incredible blessing Community of Christ has had as a faithful, hardworking steward of these historic places in Nauvoo for well over a century. It's gratitude for the opportunities to share the sacred story with generations of people from all over the world. And what an incredible honor it was to care for these historic structures and to preserve the legacy of those who came before us. So as we transfer the historic properties, we do so with pride, knowing we have served these historic places well and have done all we could to preserve and maintain the historic properties to the best of our faith community's ability. Community of Christ history has shown us that our faith community is resilient, that challenges often birth our best traditions, and that adversity strengthens our resolve to move forward. I know the Community of Christ Historic Sites Foundation will continue this tradition of resilience, not only in raising awareness of our heritage in Nauvoo, but expanding our educational programs and outreach to share that story of Nauvoo. The Alma Blair Internship Program, the program that for many of us hooked us on history, that program will continue to be funded for young scholars serving in new locations, such as the Community of Christ Library and Archives and at Joseph Smith III's Liberty Hall. The foundation will continue to welcome historians as they share their latest research in our free online lectures that happen throughout the year. Our bus tours, whether in the USA or abroad, will still be offered each year for church history enthusiasts. And new opportunities to preserve church heritage will include expanding efforts to record oral histories. Some of those oral histories even being about those who have shared the story of our Nauvoo heritage for many, many decades. We'll continue documenting church history across the globe and broadening our understanding of the past through new online lectures and educational programs about our experience in Nauvoo. So in the midst of our grief, we recognize in many ways that church history is not restricted to any one place or structure. We will continue to lift up the lessons from our Nauvoo heritage and highlight the historic people who paved a strong foundation that we stand on today. Church history is essential to our faith community, not just because we love a good story, but because it prepares us and emboldens us for the journey ahead. So as we end our time together, I want to share my immense gratitude and appreciation to John Charles for organizing tonight's gathering, and to all of those who have shared with us tonight through video, through comments made in the chats, and with your online presence. Thank you for helping write the story of Nauvoo through your own stories and personal experiences on those historic grounds along the Mississippi River. So we'll close our gathering by singing a few verses of "A Poor Wayfaring Man of Grief." It's the hymn that Joseph Smith Jr. asked to hear sung shortly before he died in Carthage, Illinois. This hymn reminds us that at the heart of our faith tradition is the call to Christ's mission, the call to compassionate, Christ-like service of people in need. The verses will be displayed on the screen, and we'll sing the words to the 19th century tune that probably accompanied this hymn when the saints first encountered it. A piano accompaniment will play the tune through once, and then we'll begin singing the second time through as that tune plays. Following the hymn, Mags Advelson will share a brief sending forth. The sending forth is an excerpt from words that Joseph Smith Jr. wrote in Nauvoo in 1842. Thank you, Mags.
Quickly before we begin singing, immediately after the sending forth, we will then have the opportunity to hear a benediction given by Dick Howard. This will be a recording of a benediction that he gave at the end of a John Whitmer Historical Association meeting in Nauvoo in the early 2000s. There will be more slides that play as he prays. Regarding the singing, I know that people can be shy about singing via Zoom. If you are in that boat, I would encourage you to sing like nobody's listening, because really nobody is. So please join in.
What do we hear in the gospel we have received? A voice of gladness, a voice of mercy from heaven, a voice of truth out of the earth. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring glad tidings of good things, who say to Zion, "See, your God reigns." Shall we not go on in so great a cause? Go forward.
Gracious and eternal God, we have become, through the gift of song and testimony, through the gift of your Spirit in each heart burning brightly, we have become your people, together from all different walks of life, from various persuasions, from various understandings and perceptions of your grace. For this we give you our heartfelt thanks. We sense deeply now a calling upon all of us and each one of us to go forth from this place singing from the heart, a witness to the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ. Send us, O Lord, with courage and with great joy. Send us with peace and abiding love for all of the peoples of the earth, that we may truly find your presence in the center of our being, emanating out to embrace all, no matter who they are, or what their condition, or what their situation is in life, embracing all in the wonderful and under the wonderful umbrella of your everlasting love. In the name of Christ, amen.